It began not with an army, nor with a king, but with a myth that a she-wolf nursing two abandoned twin boys beside the banks of the Tiber River. Romulus and Remus, names spoken more like legend than history. Two orphans who would one day lay the foundations of a civilization that would stretch farther than the mind could grasp. One of them, Romulus, would spill the first blood, kill his own brother, and raise the first stones of what the world would come to call Rome. But that brutal beginning was only the start. From the smoldering fires of tribal warfare, Rome rose, slowly, stubbornly, and without fear. She did not sprint toward greatness. She clawed for it. Through betrayals and bloodshed, the Romans learned one thing better than all others: to survive that at first, they were just another city among many in the Italian peninsula, surrounded by enemies. Etruscans in the north, Samnites in the south. But Rome had something they didn't: a hunger that knew no satisfaction. Centuries passed. Kings came and went. And then came the great shift. The Romans threw off monarchy and declared themselves a republic, no longer ruled by one man. They would now be ruled by law, or so they thought. The Senate became the heartbeat of the republic, a place of speeches, ideals, ambition, and slowly, corruption. For a time, though, it worked. Rome began to conquer, and as she conquered, she learned. She took the gods of the Greeks, the tactics of the Carthaginians, and the roads of the Etruscans, and she made them all Roman. The Punic Wars changed everything. Carthage was a rising star in the Mediterranean, but Rome saw only a threat. The two clashed, and it was a war of monsters. Hannibal, one of the greatest generals to ever live, took elephants through the Alps. He won battles, but he could not break Rome's will. Rome didn't stop. She never stopped. She crushed Carthage to the ground, salted its earth, burned its cities, erased its memory. From there, Rome became a giant. Her borders swelled. Gaul fell. Spain was absorbed. Greece became a province. And in the east, Egypt, Syria, Judea, nations bowed before her might. The legions marched in ironclad rhythm. Roads were built like veins through the empire. Latin flowed like blood. Rome was no longer just a city. It was the world. But inside, something had begun to rot. The Republic, once a proud body of shared power, began to crack under ambition. The names became darker: Sulla, Marius, Pompey, and then Julius Caesar today. Man loved by his soldiers, feared by the Senate, and cheered by the people. Caesar crossed the Rubicon with an army behind him, and Rome knew the Republic was dead. They stabbed him 23 times. Not because he was hated, but because they feared what he had become. But Caesar's death did not save the Republic. It shattered it beyond repair. And from its ashes rose something new. The Roman Empire. Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, took control. He did not call himself a king. He was the princeps, the first citizen. But everyone knew who ruled Rome. Under Augustus, the empire knew peace like never before. Pax Romana, the Roman peace. But it was a peace maintained by swords. Gladiators spilled blood in the Colosseum. Emperors played with power like children with fire. Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, names whispered in fear. Madmen on thrones of gold. Yet, Rome endured. The empire grew bloated. From Britain to Arabia, it stretched like a massive beast too large to carry its own weight. And cracks began to form. The economy wavered. The army grew tired. The Senate became a hollow shell. Emperors were made and murdered in months. In the provinces, whispers grew louder: Goths, Vandals, Huns, names from the wild. Rome had once laughed at them. Now, she watched them grow stronger. The Roman citizen no longer knew Rome. Soldiers were not Roman-born. Governors ruled without loyalty. Taxes crushed the poor. Plagues ravaged the cities. Famine turned stomachs to knots. The empire was still breathing, but shallowly. By the 3rd century, there were 26 emperors in 50 years. Most died violently. Loyalty faded. Morale collapsed. Roman roads, once symbols of control, became routes for invaders. But something stranger was happening. As Rome's power declined, her soul began to shift. A strange new religion, once outlawed and hunted, began spreading in shadows: Christianity. The empire that once worshipped Jupiter, Mars, and Venus now turned to one God and one cross. When Constantine came, everything changed again. He made Christianity legal. He moved the capital to Byzantium, later called Constantinople. It was as if Rome was trying to run from herself. The Western Empire remained, but hollowed. And as the East grew in strength and learning, the West decayed. By the year 400 AD, the ancient city of Rome, mother of all roads, was barely defensible. Its armies were gone, its treasury empty, its enemies circling like wolves around a dying lion. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Rome was sacked. Alaric, king of the Visigoths, marched into the Eternal City. For 3 days, they looted, they burned, they humiliated the empire that had once ruled them. The world watched in horror. How could this happen? How could Rome, immortal Rome, fall? But it was only the beginning of the end, and perhaps the beginning of the mystery, because what caused Rome's fall was not one sword. It was many wounds, but not all of them could be seen. And even now, centuries later, historians ask, did Rome truly fall? The sack of Rome in 410 AD was not just a military defeat. It was psychological. It broke something deeper. The Romans, those who still called themselves that, could barely speak. For centuries, they had been told they were invincible. The eternal city was not supposed to fall. It was chosen by the gods. It ruled the known world. But now, it was in ashes, and the world asked, was this the end? But Rome did not die that day. No, like a man bleeding from within, it staggered on. The Western Empire limped forward. New emperors rose, but they were emperors in name only. Puppets, shadows. Some were mere boys when crowned. Others ruled only for weeks before being slaughtered. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire, Byzantium, looked on from afar. Stronger, wealthier, and better defended. But it was not Rome. Not the Rome of Caesar. Not the Rome of Augustus. That Rome still clung to life in the West. Barely. And while she clung, the invaders closed in. The Vandals crossed from Spain into North Africa, seizing Rome's breadbasket. Grain shipments stopped. People starved. The Roman fleet, once the mistress of the Mediterranean, was defeated. And in 455 AD, the Vandals marched into Rome itself and sacked it again. This time, the humiliation was worse. They looted temples, palaces, even the sacred tombs of emperors. Priceless scrolls were burned. Statues were smashed. Women were taken. Nobles fled or were executed. Still, Rome survived. A skeleton city of ghosts and ruins, but still breathing. The empire, however, was dying. In 476 AD, the final blow came. The last emperor of the Western Roman Empire was not a general, nor a statesman. He was a child. His name was Romulus Augustulus, ironically named after the first king of Rome and the first emperor, but there was nothing royal left in him. Odoacer, a barbarian commander in the Roman army, marched into Ravenna and demanded his abdication. Romulus gave up the throne. No blood, no battle, just silence, a whimper, and with that, the curtain fell. The Western Roman Empire was no more. For centuries, it had been the light of civilization. Now it flickered out. The roads crumbled. The baths grew cold. The aqueducts ran dry. Cities emptied. Trade vanished. Latin began to die. Law turned to chaos. But here's where the mystery begins. Was this really the fall of Rome? Or was it something else? Historians have debated for centuries. Some say Rome didn't fall, it transformed. That it became the foundation for modern Europe. That the church, the language, the culture, the law, it all lived on. Just in different shapes. But others disagree. They point to the ruins. To the centuries of darkness that followed. To the wars, the hunger, the ignorance that spread like disease. Across Europe. For them, Rome's fall was real. It was death. A civilizational collapse so vast that it took nearly 1,000 years to recover. What caused it? Was it the endless civil wars that drained its strength? Was it the corruption of its leaders? The emperors who poisoned their rivals and murdered their own sons? Was it the economy? Inflation that made coins worthless? Taxation that crushed farmers? A system too bloated to support itself? Or was it the shift in values? Some blame Christianity, saying it softened Rome, that it turned the people inward, away from glory and conquest. But others say Christianity was Rome's salvation, that it preserved what could be saved when all else burned. Then there were the barbarians. They didn't just sack Rome, they became Rome. Many of them served in the legions. They married Roman women. They adopted Latin, Roman customs, Roman religion. So did Rome fall? Or did it simply absorb the wild? One thing is certain, the fall wasn't a moment. It was a process, a long, slow bleeding of power, of spirit, of identity. Imagine an old lion, once feared by all, now thin, limping, surrounded by younger, hungrier predators. That was Rome in her final days. And yet, her roar still echoes that in every parliament, in every law book, in every building that arches in stone, in every language touched by Latin, in every idea of republic, senate, citizen, Rome lives. Even the term emperor still survives. From Kaiser to Tsar, all derived from Caesar. The ghost of Rome haunts history, but her fall remains mysterious because it was not one enemy, not one event. It was many small deaths, like sand slipping through fingers. You don't notice the end until your hands are empty. And so, the greatest empire the world had known vanished, not in flames, but in silence, leaving behind only questions. What if Rome had not fallen? Would the world have reached the Renaissance centuries earlier? Would science, medicine, law, and art have flourished sooner? Or was her fall necessary for something new to grow? We may never know. But when we look at fallen cities, ruined empires, or our own fragile institutions, we remember Rome, and we ask, if she could fall, what about us?